Diogenes, the founder of Cynicism, the man who told Alexander the Great to move, the man who lived in a jar, detested everything that was flashy, unnecessary, and conventional. Today's consumer society would drive him nuts. Ironically, he led us to IKEA, and if he knew this, he might rethink his whole life decisions. But hey, there are things that you cannot really control. So how did we get from this madman to IKEA? Well, here is a dependable timeline for this. Diogenes of Sinope. Imagine living like him, totally unplugged from the matrix. You would go to jail just by mimicking his lifestyle. You see, this man was something else. He really knew what true freedom means. He walked through Athens unbothered with anxieties that kept others awake at night. People back then just said that he was a lunatic. I mean, he lived in a jar, an ancient Greek jar, something that looked like this. Insulting powerful people was a sport for him. He despised trends, social hierarchy, and superstition, and his arch-nemesis was conventionalism. He often begged for his food and basically lived in poverty. The difference is that he chose that lifestyle with a purpose. He did not say that every person should follow this lifestyle. He just had a point to prove. He wanted to show that happiness and independence were possible even if you are broke. Now, it's still better to cry in a Mercedes than in a Dacia, but let's get back to Diogenes. Some sources say that he was exiled from Sinope, today's Turkey, because of his father was a banker and he was caught corrupting coins. So Diogenes moves to Athens where he sought out Antisthenes, who was a student of Socrates, and with some back and forth Diogenes becomes his student. While Antisthenes was the founder of Cynicism in theory, Diogenes was the founder in practice. Can you imagine being the student of a homeless beggar? Diogenes was ahead of his time. He sold courses way before Tai Lopez did. He just did it in real life. Crates of Thebes, one of Diogenes' students, who is a fascinating bridge between Cynicism and Stoicism, was born in a wealthy family in Thebes, unlike Diogenes, who was exiled from Sinope and forced to live in poverty. He gave away all of his fortune to live a life of cynic simplicity, and this made him famous in Athens, a kind of Mr. Beast who actually gave away his fortune. He was quite the opposite in nature compared to Diogenes. He had a kind and humorous demeanor. He did some weird things that today would totally lead you to prison. He simply walked into people's homes and gave them life advice. Can you imagine Jordan Peterson walking into your home just to tell you to clean your room? That would be hilarious, but people back then did not mind, just because of his cheerful good nature. And that's also the reason why he was so much more appealing to students than Diogenes. He followed cynic core ideals like self-sufficiency, living in accord with nature, living free from possessions and social conventions. Crates saw philosophy not just as rebellion but also as medicine for the soul. Basically, he softened the lifestyle he adopted from Diogenes. Then he followed the Greek philosopher's path and decided to teach. One of his students was Zeno of Citium. Around the age of 30, he was a merchant who got shipwrecked in Athens. Ancient Athens was like a Silicon Valley just for philosophers. After losing his cargo, he wandered into a bookshop and began reading Socrates, and decided to devote himself to philosophy. Ancient philosophy was kind of like having a Patreon page in modern times. Ancient Greece had this thing called patronage, where the rich would help smart philosophers survive by giving them a place to live or food to eat, though most of the times they were just scraping by. The more you grinded and embraced that simple lifestyle, the wiser you were seen to be, and you were also roasted by comedians like Aristophanes. But still, the more people gathered around your ideas, the bigger your ideas got, the more the rich were willing to help you scrape by. So there is Zeno in this bookstore, and after reading Socrates and his conventions, he asked the bookseller, "Where can I find a man like this?" And guess who is in the same bookshop? Crates of Thebes. So the bookseller pointed at him and told Zeno to follow that man. So Zeno started learning under Crates of Thebes. His foundation was strongly Cynic. Crates was not only a strong influence on him, but also a great stepping stone. After this, Zeno sought out more teachers. He was like someone who first finds a mentor, then shops around different courses to deepen his knowledge. And Zeno did this for 20 years, so he could develop his own synthesis. Around 300 BC, he began teaching in Athens, and from there Stoicism was born. That follows a long path from 240 BC to the 2nd century, and started to find its end in the 5th century. Stoicism is also trending today. If you don't control wealth, fame, or luck, then the Stoic move is to stop craving them and focus on what you can control. I'm just not going to go deeper into Stoicism because it's one of the most marketed lifestyles for men online. So we need to move forward because Stoicism died out in the 5th century and Christian theology and ascetic practices took over for centuries. We are in the 16th century. Europe is a mess, just as usual. There's a religious upheaval, political instability, and the rise of nation states. I do not know if we can look at the EU today and see any difference. Now, these things make people hungry for stability, discipline, and moral texts. So in the middle of this chaos, ancient Stoic texts are rediscovered by Renaissance humanists, and people begin blending Stoicism with Christianity. So we get Neo-Stoicism, and there are some figures of this movement like Guillaume Duvalier, who translated and popularized ideas for practical use in daily life, especially for dealing with grief, misfortune, and political upheaval. We have Justus Lipsius, who argued that troubled times we need to cultivate inner constancy, a calm rational strength to face chaos, and so on. But why do these matter? Because for 10 centuries, Stoicism was buried under Christian dominance, and Neo-Stoicism revived those ancient values and reframed them to fit the Christian world. And we arrive at Descartes, the founder of modern rationalism. He argued like a Stoic that emotions can't enslave us unless guided by reason and discipline. His idea that freedom comes from rational mastery of the passion is straight from Stoicism. This happened in the 17th century, at a time when the so-called Enlightenment came, an age of reason, science, and universal human ideals. So Stoicism was the perfect medicine after the Dark Middle Ages. But what is more interesting is what Stoicism became in the Age of Enlightenment. It was all about less aesthetic lifestyle, like moderate clothing and more restrained furniture existed even in the noble class. While this was not minimalism, we can call it Neoclassicism, which looked back at ancient Greece and Rome for inspiration. It preferred simplicity, balance, order over flashy decorative Baroque and Rococo styles. And we arrive in the 19th century, where a disruption happened. Now, new philosophers took over like Goethe, Jeremy Bentham, and Fichte. They led us to Romanticism, utilitarianism, and idealism. So lifestyle and aesthetics flipped. This went for 100 years and people just got bored of it. We are back in the 20th century, where industrialization happened. And guess what complements mass production in the best way possible? Minimalist designs. It's easy to market and easy to love. And it makes sense, everything was handcrafted and lots of decoration and complexity messed up the whole production. So minimalist design was not just aesthetic, it was efficient. So from 1909 to 1930, the Bauhaus school set a completely new direction. The architects like Mies van der Rohe summed it up. Less is more, and minimalism was born here as a design philosophy. All of this was promoted as the future, while Victorian was marked as old-fashioned clutter. There is an actual phrase used in cultural history as horror Victorianorum, which means an intense dislike or irrational fear of everything Victorian. After the Second World War, America and Europe were rebuilt, and what mattered was strength, simplicity, and survival. At the same time, the West began absorbing influences from the Japanese Zen aesthetics, which emphasized emptiness, naturalness, and inner tranquility. This combination gave minimalism a deeper, almost philosophical layer. It was not just about rebuilding after the war, but about finding meaning in living with less. Scandinavian design carried the spirit forward, softening the sharpness of Bauhaus with natural woods, organic curves, and warm light, eventually reaching the mass market through IKEA's democratic designs. And this is the whole paradox of this video. Imagine telling Diogenes that one day his rejection of furniture will lead to a global furniture empire. What is minimalism if not the wish to live with less? It began as a philosophy of restraint, seeking simplicity and clarity against the excess of modern life. Yet consumer culture soon turned it into something else. IKEA sold it as furniture with clean lines. Fashion turned into capsule wardrobes. Apple made it as a style of technology. What was once a rejection of excess became another product to consume. The paradox is plain. Minimalism remains a call to simplicity, but it's also a tool of marketing, proof that even the desire for less can be sold as more. Yeah,